Billionaire marries ex's best friend, instantly regrets it when he sees his daughter. The champagne glass trembled in his hand. Not from the cold, not from the music swelling through the ballroom, but from the woman standing 30 feet away, wearing midnight blue like armor, with a child beside her who had his eyes. His exact eyes. Julian Asher had built a tech empire worth $4 billion. He had closed deals that made grown men weep. He had stood on stages in front of thousands and never once lost his composure. But right now, in the middle of his own wedding reception, his knees were threatening to give out. The little girl looked up at her mother and whispered something. The woman in blue leaned down, listened, then straightened with the kind of calm that only comes from years of learning how to survive without flinching. She had not looked at him yet. But she knew. Oh, she knew he was watching. She had always been able to feel him in a room, even back when feeling him was the only thing that made her feel alive. Vivian. The name echoed through his skull like a gunshot. Behind him, his new bride laughed at something a guest said. The sound was sharp, performative, the laugh of a woman who had spent 3 years engineering this exact moment and was now collecting her reward. But Julian could not hear her anymore. All he could hear was the blood rushing in his ears, the frantic mathematics his brain was running without his permission. The girl was maybe 6, maybe 6.5, which meant she was conceived right before he left, right before he chose the company over the woman who would have followed him anywhere, right before he made the biggest mistake of his life. And he had not known. He had not known. The champagne glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble floor. Heads turned. Conversations paused. His bride called his name with practiced concern. But Julian was already moving, walking toward the ghost of everything he had thrown away. Walking toward his daughter. If you have ever made a choice that haunted you for years, then you already understand what is about to unfold. Stay with me. This story will break your heart and rebuild it. But first, we need to go back. Back to where it all began. Back to the woman Julian Asher left behind and the empire she built from the ashes of his abandonment. Some women fall apart when they are betrayed. Vivian Cole decided to become untouchable. 6 years before this wedding, she was 26 years old and absolutely certain she had found her person. Julian was not rich yet, not famous, not the kind of name that showed up in Forbes articles and tech conferences. He was just a man with too many ideas and not enough hours in the day, a man who looked at her like she was the answer to questions he had not figured out how to ask yet. They met at a coffee shop in Brooklyn, which sounds cliché until you understand that neither of them believed in clichés. She was finishing her MBA. He was pitching investors and getting rejected so often he had started keeping a tally on his apartment wall. 47 rejections. He showed her once, laughing about it like it was a badge of honor rather than a wound. That was the thing about Julian back then. He could turn anything into fuel. She fell in love with him over burnt coffee and borrowed dreams, in a studio apartment where the heat never worked right and the neighbors fought every Thursday night like clockwork. They used to lie in bed and talk about the future like it was a place they could walk to together. He would build his company. She would build hers. They would meet in the middle somewhere, successful and still in love, proof that ambition did not have to mean loneliness. She believed him. God help her, she believed every word. The proposal came on a Tuesday. No ring because he could not afford one. Just him, standing in their tiny kitchen, holding her hands and saying he wanted forever, saying he could not imagine building anything that mattered without her beside him. She said yes before he finished the sentence. 3 months later, he got the call that changed everything. A venture capital firm in San Francisco wanted to fund his startup, full backing, millions of dollars. The catch was that he had to move immediately, had to be on a plane by the end of the week, had to commit everything he had to making this work. Vivian told him to go. She meant it too. She was not the kind of woman who held people back from their dreams. She figured they would figure it out. Long distance, visits. Eventually she would finish her degree and join him. But something shifted in the weeks after he left. His calls became shorter. His texts became sporadic. When she asked about their plans, he gave vague answers that felt like doors closing slowly. She found out she was pregnant on a Thursday morning, bent over a toilet in their Brooklyn apartment, 3 weeks after he had stopped returning her calls entirely. The test showed 2 pink lines. She stared at them for so long her vision blurred. Then she picked up her phone and called him. It rang 5 times and went to voicemail. She tried again, voicemail. Again, voicemail. She texted him, she emailed him. She left messages that started angry and ended pleading. Nothing. Silence. A wall of nothing where the man she loved used to be. 2 weeks later, she saw him on television. Some business channel her roommate was watching. Julian Asher, founder of Asher Technologies, ringing the opening bell at NASDAQ, his face glowing, his smile wide, surrounded by people in expensive suits who looked at him like he had invented the sun. He looked happy. He looked like a man who had gotten everything he wanted. And Vivian understood, with a clarity that nearly broke her, that she had never been part of the everything. She had been a placeholder, a chapter, something to keep him warm until his real life started. She turned off the television and placed her hand on her stomach, on the tiny cluster of cells that would become her daughter. "I will never let anyone make you feel like you are not enough," she whispered. "I will build us a life so good you will never have to wonder where you belong." The next 3 years were the hardest of her existence. She gave birth alone. Well, not entirely alone. Her mother flew in from Ohio and stayed for 6 weeks, but her mother had opinions about single motherhood that made every conversation feel like a tribunal. Eventually the visits stopped. Eventually it was just Vivian and a baby who screamed through the night and smiled through the morning, a tiny human who needed everything and apologized for nothing. She named her Iris, after the flower, after the goddess, after the part of the eye that lets light in. The MBA got finished in fragments, stolen between feedings and nap times and the kind of exhaustion that made her hallucinate sometimes. She took her final exams with spit up on her shoulder and dark circles so deep they looked like bruises. She graduated with honors anyway. Spite, it turned out, was an excellent motivator. Her first job was at a consulting firm that paid just enough to cover daycare and rent, with nothing left over for anything resembling a life. She worked harder than anyone else in the office, stayed later, arrived earlier, volunteered for the projects no one wanted because she understood something her colleagues did not. She had no safety net, no backup plan, no partner waiting at home to split the load. Every single thing in her life depended on her being undeniable. So she became undeniable. By the time Iris was 3, Vivian had been promoted twice. By 4, she was running her own department. By 5, she had enough clients and enough reputation to do something that terrified her. She quit. She started her own firm, Vivian Cole Consulting, just her and a laptop and a list of contacts she had spent years cultivating. The first 6 months were brutal. She maxed out credit cards. She took meetings in coffee shops because she could not afford office space. She pitched herself to anyone who would listen and most people who would not. But then one client said yes, then another. Then a Fortune 500 company came calling because someone had recommended her for a turnaround project no one else would touch. She touched it. She fixed it. She saved that company $400 million in 18 months, and suddenly Vivian Cole was not a struggling single mother anymore. She was a name. She was a reputation. She was the woman you called when everything was falling apart, and you needed someone who would not flinch. The corner office came eventually. The apartment overlooking Central Park. The private school for Iris, where children of senators and tech founders learned their ABCs alongside her daughter, a girl who had no famous father and did not seem to notice or care. Iris was remarkable. Not just intelligent, though she was that. Not just beautiful, though she was that too. She had a quality that Vivian could not quite name, a kind of settled certainty about her place in the world that most adults never achieved. She never asked about her father. Vivian had prepared for the question, had rehearsed answers that were honest without being bitter, factual without being cruel. But the question never came. Iris seemed to understand, in the intuitive way children sometimes do, that their family was complete, that the two of them were enough. Maybe she sensed that asking would hurt her mother. Maybe she simply did not feel the absence. Either way, Vivian was grateful. She had built them a life that did not require explanation or apology, a life where their worth was not measured by who had stayed or who had left. And then the invitation arrived. It came on a Tuesday, because the universe apparently had a sense of humor. Vivian was between meetings when her assistant brought in the mail, mostly contracts, thank you notes, the usual. But at the bottom of the stack sat an envelope that made her heart stutter. Ivory cardstock, gold foil, the kind of paper that costs more than some people's groceries. She knew before she opened it. Some part of her body recognized the threat before her brain caught up. Miranda Lawson and Julian Asher request the honor of your presence at their wedding. Miranda. The name hit her like a slap. Miranda Lawson, her college roommate, her closest friend during the hardest years of her life, the woman who had held her while she cried the night Julian left, the woman who had sworn, over wine and shared fury, that he was not worth her tears, the woman who had apparently spent the years since collecting intelligence and planning a siege. Vivian sat very still in her corner office, the invitation trembling slightly in her hands. Outside her window, Manhattan glittered like a promise. Inside her chest, something cold and sharp was waking up. She thought about Miranda's calls over the past few years, the casual questions about Julian. How is his company doing? Is he seeing anyone? You never really told me why you two broke up. At the time, Vivian had dismissed it as idle curiosity, old friends catching up, nothing more. But it was reconnaissance. Every question had been a data point. Every conversation had been market research. Miranda had studied Julian like a target, identified his vulnerabilities, and executed a 3-year campaign to capture a billionaire. And now she wanted Vivian there to witness her victory, to sit in the audience while the man who left her married the friend who betrayed her. It was not an invitation. It was a trophy display. Most women would have thrown the invitation away, would have pretended it never arrived, protected themselves from the spectacle of their own humiliation. But Vivian Cole was not most women. She had spent 6 years transforming pain into power. She had built an empire from the wreckage of abandonment. She had raised a daughter who carried herself like royalty because she had never been taught to expect less. And now she was being summoned to watch her past marry her betrayal. Fine. Let them have their performance. She would attend. She would bring Iris. And she would walk into that wedding not as a casualty of old wounds, but as the queen she had spent 6 years becoming. Vivian picked up her phone and typed a response. Delighted to attend, see you there. She hit send and smiled. It was not a nice smile. The morning of the wedding arrived wrapped in unseasonable sunshine, the kind of crisp autumn day that photographers dream about and brides pay extra to guarantee. Vivian woke at 5, though she had barely slept. She spent an hour choosing her outfit, which was unlike her. Normally she dressed with efficient precision, grabbing whatever projected competence and moving on. But today was different. Today every detail mattered. The dress was midnight blue, custom made by a designer who usually required 6-month waiting lists but had bumped her to the front because of who she was. The cut was architectural, sharp lines and flowing fabric that made her look like she had been carved from moonlight. Not trying too hard, not flashy, just undeniably, quietly devastating. She did her own makeup. Foundation, concealer for the shadows under her eyes, a lip color dark enough to make her look dangerous. Her hair fell loose around her shoulders because she never wore it down anymore, and she wanted Julian to remember. She wanted him to remember everything he had walked away from. Iris was already awake when Vivian went to get her, sitting up in bed with a book open on her lap. At 6 years old, she was reading at a 4th grade level, devouring stories the way some children devoured candy. "Good morning, sunshine," Vivian said from the doorway. Iris looked up and smiled. That smile, every time it hit Vivian somewhere deep and tender. "Are we still going to the fancy party?" "We are. You ready for an adventure?" Iris considered the question with the seriousness she brought to everything. "Will there be cake?" "Definitely cake, probably very expensive cake." "Then I am ready." They drove to Connecticut in a hired car, black and sleek and understated. Iris pressed her face to the window and narrated everything she saw. "Cows, Mommy. A red barn. Why do barns have to be red? Is there a rule?" Vivian answered every question, grateful for the distraction. Her stomach was a knot of anticipation and dread, but she kept her voice light. Iris did not need to know what today really meant. She just needed to enjoy the cake and the pretty dresses and the adventure of it all. The estate appeared around a bend in the road, and even Vivian had to admit it was impressive. Sprawling grounds, Gothic architecture, enough flowers to stock a botanical garden. The venue screamed money in that particular way that new money always did, loud and insistent and slightly desperate. "It is like a castle," Iris breathed. "It is," Vivian agreed. "But remember, not everyone who lives in a castle is a good person." Iris nodded slowly. "Like in the stories, sometimes the villain has the biggest house." "Exactly like that." They walked up the stone path toward the main entrance, and Vivian felt the shift in the air as people noticed her. Recognition rippled through the crowd. Heads turned. Conversations paused. The kind of attention that followed powerful women into spaces where they were not expected. She had spent years learning to feed on that attention, to let it fuel her rather than intimidate her. Today she would need every drop. The ceremony space had been transformed into something approaching a cathedral. White fabric draped from every surface. Crystal chandeliers scattered rainbow light across walls lined with candles. Flowers cascaded from arrangements that probably cost more than most people earned in a month. Vivian found their seats in the 3rd row, close enough to see everything, far enough to maintain deniability. She settled Iris beside her and handed her a small notebook and pen. "If you get bored, you can draw." Iris accepted the supplies with the gravity of a surgeon receiving instruments. "I will document everything." "Good girl." The music swelled. Guests rose, and Vivian prepared herself to watch the man she used to love marry the woman who had stolen him with a strategy as cold as any corporate takeover. Julian appeared at the altar first. 6 years had changed him in ways that made Vivian's breath catch despite herself. The hungry young entrepreneur she remembered had been replaced by something polished and formidable. His suit probably cost more than their old Brooklyn apartment. His posture radiated the kind of confidence that came from years of being right about things that mattered. But his eyes looked tired. Not unhappy, exactly. Not miserable. Just exhausted in that particular way that people get when they have been performing so long they have forgotten what authenticity feels like. He smiled at the guests, nodded at colleagues, played the role of happy groom with technical precision. Vivian watched him and felt something she did not expect. Pity. He had gotten everything he wanted: the company, the money, the status, and standing there in his perfect suit in his perfect venue about to marry his perfect strategic acquisition of a bride, he looked like a man serving a sentence rather than celebrating a victory. The music shifted to signal the bride's entrance. Miranda appeared in the doorway, and Vivian had to give her credit. She knew how to make an entrance. The dress was a masterpiece of calculated opulence, silk and lace cascading into a train that required 3 attendants to manage, diamonds at her throat and wrists catching the light like captured stars. Her smile was radiant, triumphant, the expression of a general surveying a conquered battlefield. She floated down the aisle with rehearsed perfection, pausing to acknowledge the important guests, bestowing her brilliance upon the gathered witnesses to her ascension. This was not a woman walking toward love. This was a woman accepting a throne. When Miranda's eyes found Vivian in the 3rd row, something flickered beneath the bridal radiance. Just for a second, a flash of vicious satisfaction that said, "I won and you lost, and I wanted you here to see it." Vivian met her gaze and smiled. The smile said nothing at all, which was somehow worse. Miranda's composure wavered for just a moment before she recovered and continued her procession toward the altar, toward the man she had spent 3 years acquiring. "Mommy," Iris whispered, "the bride keeps looking at us weird. Some people do not know how to be happy unless they think someone else is sad. That is dumb." "Yes, it really is." The ceremony proceeded with the kind of flawless execution that unlimited budgets could purchase. The officiant spoke about love and commitment and partnership. Julian recited his vows with technical competence and zero emotional resonance. Miranda delivered hers with enough enthusiasm for both of them, her voice carrying the satisfaction of a woman finally claiming what she had worked so hard to obtain. Vivian watched it all and felt increasingly certain that she was witnessing not a wedding but a transaction, a merger dressed in white, an acquisition celebrated with champagne and a string quartet. "Do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." The words came out flat, automatic, like Julian was signing a contract rather than pledging his life. "And do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." Miranda's response was fervent enough to make up for his lack. Her grip on her bouquet tightened with possessive intensity. The kiss that sealed the marriage lasted exactly long enough to satisfy photographers and no longer. Julian's participation was dutiful rather than passionate. When they turned to face the applauding crowd as husband and wife, his expression was that of a man who had just completed a marathon he had not trained for. And then his eyes found Vivian. The impact was visible, physical. His whole body went still, like a man who had just seen a ghost. She watched recognition explode across his features, watched him process her presence, her transformation, the years between who she had been and who she had become. And then his gaze dropped to the child beside her. To Iris, to the little girl with his eyes and his stubborn chin, and the unconscious elegance that genetics could not explain away. The color drained from Julian's face. His new wife was tugging at his arm, trying to guide him down the aisle for the recessional, but he was frozen, staring, his brain running calculations he had never expected to have to make. "Mommy," Iris said quietly, "why does the groom look like he is going to be sick?" Vivian took her daughter's hand and squeezed gently. "Because some people spend their whole lives running from the truth, and eventually it catches up." The reception was held in a ballroom that looked like it had been designed by someone who had never heard the word restraint. Gold everywhere, crystal everywhere, flowers cascading from arrangements that defied both gravity and good taste. The caterers circulated with champagne and canapes, while a string quartet played something classical and forgettable in the corner. Vivian moved through the crowd like a shark through water, smooth, purposeful, aware of every current and every potential threat. People approached her with the mixture of deference and curiosity that powerful women always inspired. She made small talk with venture capitalists, exchanged pleasantries with tech executives, let her presence do the work of establishing her position in the social hierarchy. Iris stayed close, her notebook filling with observations written in her careful handwriting. She drew the flowers. She noted the colors of people's dresses. She documented the cake, which had 7 tiers and looked like it might collapse under its own ambition. Vivian was discussing market trends with a hedge fund manager when she felt the shift in the air behind her. She knew who it was before she turned around, knew it from the way her skin prickled, from the sudden acceleration of her heartbeat, from the weight of attention that could only come from one person. Julian. He stood 3 feet away, his champagne glass abandoned somewhere, his expression a wreck of confusion and desperation and dawning horror. Vivian, his voice came out strangled, rough, the voice of a man whose world was reorganizing itself without his permission. Julian. She kept her tone pleasant, professional, the voice she used in boardrooms when she wanted someone to feel the full weight of her disinterest. Congratulations on your wedding. The venue is beautiful. He ignored the pleasantry entirely. His eyes kept dropping to Iris, then snapping back to Vivian, then dropping to Iris again. She is yours. The words were not a question. She is ours. Vivian felt Iris press closer to her side, felt her daughter's small hand slip into her own. Whatever came next, she would not let this man frighten her child. Her name is Iris. She is 6 years old. She is brilliant and kind, and she has never once asked about you. Julian made a sound like he had been punched. I did not know. The words came out desperate, pleading. Vivian, I swear to God I did not know. If I had known about her, I would have stayed. I would never have left. I would have been there for everything. Really? The single word fell between them like a blade. Really, Julian, you would have given up the funding, the company, the future you wanted so badly you stopped returning my calls. She let the questions land one by one, watching each one hit. I tried to reach you. For weeks. You disappeared. I was told you had moved on. His voice cracked. I was told you did not want to hear from me. Told by whom? The question hung in the air. Vivian already knew the answer, but she wanted to hear him say it, wanted to watch him put the pieces together in real time. Julian's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, realization, horror. Miranda, he breathed. She said she had talked to you. She said you told her we were over, that you wanted me to focus on the company and stop trying to reach out. And you believed her. I was working 20-hour days. I was barely sleeping. I trusted her because she was your friend and I thought she had your best interests at heart. Vivian laughed. It was not a kind laugh. My friend. Yes. My friend who spent 3 years studying you like a stock she wanted to acquire. My friend who asked me questions about you for years under the guise of catching up. My friend who is currently wearing a wedding dress and your ring while we have this conversation. Julian looked like a man drowning. I did not know about Miranda, about what she did, about any of it, and I definitely did not know about Iris. The way he said her daughter's name, reverent and anguished, made something twist in Vivian's chest. Please, you have to believe me. I do not have to do anything. The words came out cold, final, the voice of a woman who had stopped owing anyone anything a long time ago. Mommy, Iris tugged at her hand. Can we go look at the cake now? Vivian looked down at her daughter, at the serious little face studying the situation with that uncanny perceptiveness, at the eyes that matched the desperate man standing before them. Of course, sweetheart. She straightened and fixed Julian with a gaze that could have frozen nitrogen. Enjoy your reception. Your wife is probably looking for you. She turned and walked away, her daughter's hand warm in her own. Behind her, she heard Julian call her name once, twice, then silence. She did not look back. The gardens were quieter, A stone fountain bubbled peacefully in the center of a courtyard lined with roses. The sounds of the reception faded to a distant hum. Vivian found a bench and sat, pulling Iris onto her lap. Her heart was racing, though she would never let it show. Years of practice had taught her to keep her turmoil internal, to present a surface so calm that no one could find purchase for their attacks. But beneath that surface, she was shaking. "Are you okay, Mommy?" Iris was looking at her with those impossible eyes. Those eyes that belonged to a man who had just discovered his entire life was built on lies. "I am okay, baby. Just needed some fresh air." That man, the groom, he looked at us funny. "I know." "Why?" Vivian considered the question, considered the 1,000 ways she could answer it. Considered the promises she had made to herself about honesty and protection, and the careful balance between them. "He knew Mommy a long time ago, before you were born. Seeing me was a surprise." Iris processed this with her usual thoughtfulness. "Was he your friend?" "Something like that." "Is he a bad person?" The question deserved honesty. Vivian had always believed that. "He is a person who made bad choices, who let other people make decisions for him instead of thinking for himself. That does not make someone bad, necessarily, but it does make them responsible for the consequences." Iris nodded slowly. "Like when Tommy copied Sarah's homework and then blamed her for giving him the wrong answers." "Exactly like that." They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the fountain. The October sun was warm on their faces. Somewhere inside, a party was continuing without them. "I like it out here," Iris said eventually. "It is quieter." "Me too, sweetheart, me too." The footsteps approached before Vivian could prepare herself. She knew the sound of them instantly, knew the weight and the rhythm and the particular way they hesitated before the final approach. Julian appeared at the entrance to the courtyard, his wedding attire slightly disheveled now, his expression that of a man who had just walked through fire and was still smoking. "Please," he said, "just give me 5 minutes. That is all I am asking." Vivian felt Iris tense against her, felt her daughter instinctively press closer, seeking protection from this stranger who radiated distress. "You are at your own wedding reception. Your wife will notice you are missing." "I do not care." The words came out raw, desperate. "Miranda can wait, everyone can wait. I just need to understand what happened, what I missed, what I lost." Vivian looked at him, really looked for the first time since she had arrived. He was older, lines around his eyes that had not been there before, silver threading through the dark hair at his temples. But beneath the polish and the expensive suit, she could still see the man she had loved. The man who had looked at her like she contained galaxies. The man who had proposed in their tiny kitchen and meant every word. The man who had left without saying goodbye. "What do you want me to say, Julian?" Her voice was quieter now. "Tired, that I forgive you, that we can pretend the last 6 years did not happen. You are married. You made your choice. Again." "I did not know what I was choosing." He stepped closer, stopped when he saw her stiffen. "I thought I was building a future. I did not realize I was destroying one." "That is exactly what you should have realized. That is what you should have made sure of before you disappeared. A real partner would have checked, would have kept trying, would have at least shown up long enough to hear that we were going to have a child." The word hit him visibly. He flinched like she had slapped him. "She is really mine." "Look at her." He did, really looked, probably for the first time since the shock had worn off enough to let him think. Iris stared back with those pale blue eyes. His eyes, the stubborn set of her jaw, the way she held herself with unconscious dignity even at 6 years old. The evidence was undeniable. "Oh God," Julian's voice broke. "Oh God, Vivian, she is beautiful, she is so beautiful." "Yes, she is." "Can I?" He stopped, swallowed, started again. "Can I talk to her? Just introduce myself." "No." The word hit him like a physical blow. No, why not? She is my daughter. I have rights. I should be able to. You have nothing. Vivian's voice went cold. The boardroom voice. The voice that made executives twice her age rethink their positions. You have no rights here, Julian. You were not there when she was born. You were not there when she was sick. You were not there for the first word or the first step or the first day of school or any of the 1,000 moments that turn a baby into a person. You do not get to show up at your wedding to another woman and claim parental rights because you suddenly realized what you threw away. Mommy, Iris's voice was small. He is crying. Vivian looked and saw that it was true. Julian Asher, billionaire tech founder, was standing in a rose garden at his own wedding reception with tears running down his face. Some people only learn the cost of their choices when it is too late to change them, she said quietly, to her daughter, to him, to herself. I can change. Julian's voice was barely a whisper. I can be different. I can make this right. Whatever it takes, whatever you need, just please, please let me know her. The plea hung in the air between them. For a moment, just a moment, Vivian remembered the man who had held her in a cold apartment and promised forever, remembered believing him, remembered what it felt like to trust someone with your whole future. Then she remembered the silence, the unanswered calls, the months of waiting for someone who never came back. No. The word was final. She is not yours to know. She is mine. I made her who she is without any help from you, and I will not let you disrupt her life because you are having a crisis of conscience at an inconvenient time. She stood, lifting Iris with her. Go back to your wife, Julian. Go back to the life you chose, and stay away from my daughter. She walked past him without looking back, through the gardens, through the ballroom, past the 7-tier cake and the string quartet and all the glittering symbols of a world she had never asked to rejoin. She collected her coat. She collected her daughter. She walked out the front door into the October sunshine and did not stop until she reached the waiting car. Only then, safely behind tinted windows as the estate disappeared behind them, did she let herself breathe. Mommy, Iris said softly, are you sad? Vivian looked at her daughter, at this perfect, impossible person who had made everything worth it. No, sweetheart, I'm not sad. Then why are you crying? Vivian touched her face and realized it was true. Tears were sliding down her cheeks without her permission. Sometimes people cry when they are relieved, when something hard is over and they realize they survived it. Iris considered this. Did we survive? Vivian pulled her daughter close, pressed a kiss to her hair, and watched the Connecticut countryside blur past the window. We did more than survive, baby. We won. But back at the estate, in a rose garden where a fountain still bubbled peacefully, Julian Asher remained frozen in place. His wedding continued without him. His bride was probably searching for him. His entire future was waiting to be collected. None of it mattered. He could only see what he had lost, what he had never known he had. What he would spend the rest of his life trying to get back. 3 months later, the headlines wrote themselves. Tech billionaire Julian Asher files for divorce after 90 days. Sources cite irreconcilable differences. Vivian read the notification on her phone while standing in line at Iris's school, waiting for dismissal. Around her, other parents scrolled their own devices or made small talk about holiday plans. None of them knew that the woman in the cashmere coat was reading about the implosion of her past. She felt nothing, or almost nothing, a distant satisfaction that she refused to examine too closely, a flicker of something that might have been vindication if she had let it grow. But mostly she felt tired. The wedding had taken more out of her than she wanted to admit, not the event itself, but the aftermath. The sleepless nights replaying conversations, the way Iris had started asking questions she had never asked before, the constant vigilance, waiting for Julian to make his next move. because she knew he would. Men like Julian did not accept defeat. They did not hear the word no and simply walk away. They strategized. They regrouped. They came back with new angles and better leverage and the relentless certainty that enough money could solve any problem. She had been preparing for 3 months, quietly, carefully, making sure her legal position was unassailable, her finances untouchable, her daughter protected by every mechanism available to a woman with her resources. The school doors opened, and children flooded out in a chaos of backpacks and shouted goodbyes. Vivian spotted Iris immediately, that dark hair and serious expression cutting through the crowd like a beacon. "Mommy," Iris reached her and took her hand with the easy confidence of a child who had never doubted her welcome. "We learned about hibernation today. Did you know that bears can sleep for 5 whole months?" "I did know that. What else did you learn?" They walked toward the car together, Iris narrating her day with the detailed precision she brought to everything. A disagreement about crayons, a revelation about fractions. The way her teacher's voice went funny when she was tired. Vivian listened and responded and felt the familiar warmth of this routine, this ordinary magic of motherhood that she had built entirely on her own. She did not notice the black sedan parked across the street. She did not notice the man watching from inside it. But she would soon. The first letter arrived on a Tuesday. Because of course it did. Vivian recognized the law firm's letterhead immediately. Whitmore and Associates, one of the most prestigious family law practices in New York, the kind of firm that charged more per hour than most people earned in a week. She opened the envelope with steady hands and read the contents with the clinical detachment she had learned to deploy in crisis situations. Julian Asher was petitioning for paternity rights. He had submitted DNA evidence obtained through means the letter did not specify. He was requesting custody arrangements, visitation schedules, and involvement in all major decisions regarding the minor child Iris Cole. The letter was professionally written, legally precise, and absolutely devastating in its implications. He was not going to disappear. He was not going to accept her refusal. He was going to use every resource at his disposal to force his way into their lives, and he had more resources than almost anyone on the planet. Vivian set the letter down on her desk and looked out the window at the Manhattan skyline she had conquered through sheer force of will. Then she picked up her phone and called her own attorney. "We need to meet today." The next 6 weeks were a masterclass in legal warfare. Julian's team filed motion after motion, each one more aggressive than the last. They demanded DNA testing. They requested financial disclosures. They questioned Vivian's fitness as a parent based on her demanding career and extensive travel schedule. Every attack was technically legal and absolutely ruthless. Vivian's team responded with equal precision. They documented Julian's complete absence from Iris's life. They presented evidence of his initial abandonment, the unanswered calls, the months of silence. They argued that a man who had never expressed interest in his child until discovering her existence by accident had no standing to suddenly demand parental rights. The legal bills mounted. The stress accumulated. The carefully constructed piece of Vivian's life began showing cracks that she worked desperately to hide. Iris noticed anyway. "Mommy, why are you so tired lately?" They were eating dinner together, just the two of them at the kitchen island. Pasta with tomato sauce, Iris's favorite. The kind of simple meal Vivian made when she did not have the energy for anything elaborate. "Work has been busy, sweetheart. Lots of meetings." "You always say that, but you look different, tired now, worried tired." Vivian set down her fork and really looked at her daughter. At this perceptive, impossible child who could read her moods better than anyone she had ever met. "Some things are happening that Mommy is trying to handle. Grown-up things. I do not want you to worry about them." Is it about the man from the wedding? The question landed like a stone in still water. Vivian had not mentioned Julian since that day, had not spoken his name or referenced the encounter, or done anything to remind Iris of the stranger who had cried in a rose garden. But children remembered. Children always remembered. Yes, it is about him. Is he trying to take me away? The fear in Iris's voice made Vivian's heart clench so hard she thought it might stop. No, baby, no one is taking you anywhere. You are mine and you will always be mine. She moved around the island and pulled Iris into her arms. I would burn the whole world down before I let anyone take you from me. Do you understand? Iris nodded against her shoulder. I do not want to go with him. I do not know him. You do not have to do anything you do not want to do, I promise. But even as she said the words, Vivian knew they might not be true. Courts made decisions that overrode mothers' wishes all the time. Money influenced outcomes in ways that people pretended did not happen. Julian had $4 billion and the determination of a man confronting his own mortality. She was fighting a war she might not be able to win. The mediation was scheduled for a Thursday in late January. Vivian arrived early with her legal team, 3 attorneys, a paralegal, and enough documentation to fill a small library. She had prepared for this meeting the way she prepared for hostile takeover negotiations. Every argument anticipated, every counter ready, every possible outcome mapped and strategized. Julian arrived exactly on time. He looked different than he had at the wedding. The polish was still there, but something underneath had shifted. He seemed thinner, more focused, the easy confidence replaced by something harder and more desperate. He looked like a man who had lost everything and was trying to claw his way back. Their eyes met across the conference table. Vivian kept her expression neutral, professional, the face she showed adversaries in every negotiation. Julian's expression was harder to read. Regret and determination, and something that might have been hope if she squinted at it sideways. The mediator cleared her throat. Thank you all for being here today. The purpose of this session is to explore whether we can reach an agreement regarding custody and visitation arrangements for the minor child without proceeding to a full court hearing. She looked between them with the practiced neutrality of someone who had seen every kind of family conflict imaginable. I want to remind both parties that the focus of our discussion should be the best interests of the child. Not past grievances, not personal feelings, but what arrangement will provide the most stable and healthy environment for Iris going forward. Julian's lead attorney spoke first. My client is seeking joint custody with a graduated visitation schedule. He understands that an immediate transition would be disruptive and is prepared to take whatever time is necessary to build a relationship with his daughter. He is also prepared to establish a substantial trust fund for her education and future security. Vivian's attorney responded. My client opposes any custody arrangement that would disrupt the stable environment she has single-handedly created for her daughter over the past 6 years. Mr. Asher had no contact with the child from birth until 3 months ago. His sudden interest appears to be motivated by the personal crisis surrounding his failed marriage, rather than any genuine commitment to parenting. That is not fair. Julian's voice cut through the legal formalities. That is not what this is about. Mr. Asher, his attorney cautioned, let me handle this. No, Julian shook his head. No, I need to say this myself. He looked directly at Vivian, not at the attorneys or the mediator, at her. I made terrible choices. I know that. I let myself be manipulated by someone I trusted, and I failed to verify the information I was given. I should have tried harder to reach you. I should have shown up in person instead of accepting second-hand reports. I should have been better. He paused. His hands were shaking slightly on the table. But I did not know about Iris. I swear to you, Vivian, on everything I have ever cared about, I did not know. And the moment I found out, everything changed. My marriage, my priorities, everything I thought I was building. None of it matters compared to the fact that I have a daughter I have never held. A child who has grown up without knowing I existed. Years I can never get back. His voice cracked. I am not trying to take her from you. I am not trying to disrupt what you have built. I just want a chance to know her, a chance to be part of her life, a chance to be the father I should have been from the beginning. The room was silent. Vivian felt the weight of every eye on her. The attorneys, the mediator, Julian himself, all of them waiting for her response. She had prepared arguments for every legal point, had anticipated every strategic maneuver, but she had not prepared for this. For sincerity. For a broken man asking not for victory, but for mercy. You want a chance, she said finally. Her voice was quiet but steady. After 6 years of nothing. After I raised her alone through every illness and every nightmare and every milestone you missed. After I built a life that did not include you because you made it clear you did not want to be included. Now you want a chance. Yes. The single word hung in the air. Vivian looked at this man she had once loved more than anything. This man who had broken her heart so completely she had needed years to rebuild it. This man who was now begging for something she had the power to grant or deny. She thought about Iris. About the questions that would come regardless of what she decided. About the day her daughter would be old enough to research her own history and discover that her mother had denied her access to her father. She thought about the weight of choices and how they echoed through generations. She thought about what it meant to win and what it cost to keep winning. I need time, she said, to think about this, to talk to Iris, to figure out what is actually best for her, not what I want or what you want. Julian nodded. His eyes were wet. Whatever you need, however long it takes, I will wait. The mediator made notes about scheduling a follow-up session. The attorneys exchanged documents and procedural agreements. The formal machinery of custody disputes ground forward. But something had shifted in the room. Something had cracked open that could not be closed again. That night, Vivian sat on the edge of Iris's bed and tried to find words for the impossible. Sweetheart, I need to talk to you about something important. Iris looked up from the book she was reading. Her expression was serious, attentive, older than her years. About the man from the wedding. Yes, about him. Vivian took a breath. His name is Julian. A long time ago, before you were born, he and I were together. We loved each other very much. But then he had to go away for his work, and some things happened that made us lose touch with each other. He did not know about you until the wedding. He did not know you existed. Iris processed this with her usual thoughtfulness. So he is my father. The word hit Vivian like a physical blow. They had never used that word. She had never needed to explain the absence because Iris had never asked for an explanation. Yes, he is. Silence stretched between them. Does he want to know me? He does, very much. He has been asking for a chance to spend time with you. Do I have to? The question was simple, direct. The kind of question only children asked because adults had learned to dance around the things that scared them. No, baby. You do not have to do anything you do not want to do. This is your choice. Whatever you decide, I will support you. Iris was quiet for a long moment. Her fingers traced the edge of her book, following some pattern only she could see. What do you want me to do? Vivian felt tears threatening and forced them back. I want you to be happy. I want you to have everything you need. And I want you to make this decision based on what you feel, not what you think I want. But what do you feel? Iris insisted. You always say feelings matter. What are yours? Vivian closed her eyes. I feel scared. Scared that he will hurt you the way he hurt me. Scared that letting him in will change everything we have built together. Scared that I will lose you somehow, even though I know that is not rational. She opened her eyes and found her daughter watching her with that preternatural understanding. But I also feel like maybe I do not have the right to make this choice for you. You deserve to know where you came from. You deserve to decide for yourself what kind of relationship you want with him. And maybe keeping him away is not about protecting you. Maybe it is about protecting me. The honesty cost her something. Some piece of armor she had worn so long she had forgotten it was there. Iris reached out and took her mother's hand. I think, she said slowly, that I would like to meet him, just once, to see. Are you sure? No, but you always say being sure is not the same as being brave, and I think this is a time for brave. Vivian pulled her daughter into her arms and held her so tightly, she worried about breaking something. You are the bravest person I know, she whispered into Iris's hair. You know that, right? I learned it from you. They stayed like that for a long time, mother and daughter, two people who had built a world together and were now preparing to let someone else in. Whatever happened next, they would face it the way they had faced everything. Together. The first meeting was arranged for a Saturday afternoon in early February. Neutral territory, a children's museum in the city, crowded enough to provide distraction but public enough to feel safe. Vivian would be present but at a distance, close enough to intervene if needed, far enough to give them space. Julian arrived 20 minutes early. Vivian watched him pace near the entrance, checking his phone, adjusting his jacket, radiating nervousness like a teenager on a first date. He had dressed carefully but casually. No suit, no visible displays of wealth, just a man in jeans and a sweater trying desperately to seem approachable. She approached with Iris holding her hand. Julian saw them coming and went completely still. His eyes found Iris and stayed there, drinking her in, cataloging every detail of this child he had helped create but never known. Iris studied him back with that direct, assessing gaze she had inherited from her mother. Hi, Julian said. His voice was barely audible. I am Julian. I know, you are my biological father. The clinical term made him flinch slightly, but he recovered. Yes, I am, and you are Iris, which is a beautiful name. My mom picked it, after the flower and the goddess and the part of the eye that lets light in. She sounds very thoughtful. She is. Vivian watched this exchange from 3 feet away, close enough to hear every word, far enough to let them navigate it themselves. I brought you something, Julian said. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small wrapped package. I did not know what you liked, so I asked around. Apparently this is popular. Iris took the package with careful hands and unwrapped it methodically. Inside was a book. Not just any book, but the latest in a fantasy series Vivian knew Iris had been wanting. How did you know I liked this series? I asked your school. They said you had done a book report on the first one. Iris looked at the book, then at Julian, then at the book again. Thank you, this was thoughtful. You are welcome, I hope you like it. The awkwardness was palpable. 2 strangers trying to build a bridge across 6 years of nothing. Every word weighted with too much importance. Every gesture analyzed for meaning. Do you want to look at the dinosaur exhibit? Vivian suggested. I hear they have a new T-Rex skeleton. Iris nodded. Julian nodded. They moved into the museum together, not quite a family but not quite strangers either. Something undefined. Something becoming. Vivian followed at a distance and watched. Watched Julian point at exhibits and explain things with nervous enthusiasm. Watched Iris ask questions that were half curiosity and half test. Watched them slowly, carefully, tentatively begin the process of figuring out how to exist in each other's lives. It was not easy. It was not instant. It was not the fairy tale ending that movies promised. But it was something. It was a start. The months that followed were complicated in ways Vivian had not anticipated. Julian was present, Consistently, persistently present. He showed up for scheduled visits. He called when he said he would call. He remembered details Iris mentioned and followed up on them later. He was trying, genuinely trying, in a way that was impossible to dismiss. But presence was not the same as belonging. Iris remained cautious, polite but guarded. She tolerated Julian's attention without fully embracing it. She answered his questions without volunteering information. She accepted his gifts without displaying excessive gratitude. She was waiting, Vivian realized, waiting to see if this would last, waiting to see if this man would prove himself or disappear like she somehow knew he had disappeared before. Smart girl. Julian, for his part, seemed to understand that he was on probation. He did not push, did not demand, did not try to buy his way into affection with expensive presents or extravagant outings. He showed up with books and art supplies and attention, the currency of ordinary fatherhood that money could not substitute for. The divorce from Miranda finalized in April. The details were ugly: financial fraud, misrepresentation, a prenup that Miranda's lawyers had apparently manipulated into invalidity. She walked away with a settlement that was substantial by any normal measure, but a fraction of what she had been hoping to claim. Vivian read about it in the business pages and felt nothing. Miranda had gotten what she deserved, not because of Julian's lawyers or the court's decisions, but because she had built her entire life on a foundation of manipulation, and that foundation had inevitably collapsed. Some people destroyed themselves. They just needed enough time and rope. Summer arrived with its usual chaos of camp schedules and vacation planning, and the relentless sunshine that made everything feel temporarily possible. Iris was 7 now, reading at a 6th grade level, asking questions about everything from photosynthesis to philosophy, still guarded with Julian but less so than before, starting to reference him in conversation without prompting. "My dad says that too," she mentioned once, discussing some scientific fact she had learned. The word landed in the room like a small explosion. "My dad." Vivian caught Julian's expression across the park, where they were having a supervised picnic. The naked hope in his eyes, the desperate gratitude for 2 small words that signified more than any legal document ever could. She looked away before he could see whatever was on her own face. The custody arrangement had been formalized months ago. Joint legal custody, primary physical custody with Vivian, scheduled visits and holidays according to a detailed calendar that their lawyers had negotiated down to the hour. It was working. Against all her expectations and preparations, it was actually working. Julian had become a fixture in their lives, not the center, not the focus, but a presence that Iris was learning to rely on in ways that were small but genuine. He remembered her favorite ice cream flavor. He knew which books she was reading and asked about them. He listened when she talked and asked follow-up questions that showed he had actually been paying attention. He was being the father he should have been from the beginning. And Vivian did not know what to do with that. The conversation happened in September, a year after the wedding that had started everything. Julian had dropped Iris off after a weekend visit. She had run inside to show her mother some project they had worked on together, leaving the 2 adults alone on the front step for the first time in months. "Thank you," Julian said quietly, "for giving me this chance, for letting me know her. I know I do not deserve it." Vivian looked at him in the fading evening light. At this man who had broken her heart and then spent a year trying to prove he could be trusted with the pieces. "No, you did not deserve it, but she did." "I know," he nodded. "I know this has never been about me. It is about her. It has always been about her." "Yes." They stood in silence for a moment. The September air was cooling, carrying the first hints of autumn. "I still think about it," Julian said. "What things would have been like if I had come back, if I had checked, if I had not let Miranda convince me that you had moved on. Vivian felt something twist in her chest. Old pain, mostly healed but never quite gone. There is no point in thinking about that. We cannot change what happened. We can only decide what happens next. I know, but I want you to understand something. He turned to face her fully. I never stopped loving you, even when I thought you had moved on, even when I married Miranda, even when I had convinced myself that the life I was building was the life I wanted. There was always a part of me that knew something was missing, that knew I had made a terrible mistake. Julian, I am not saying this to pressure you. I am not expecting anything. I just need you to know that what we had was real. And losing you, was the worst thing that ever happened to me. Even worse than the years I spent not knowing about Iris. Because at least that was ignorance. Losing you was a choice I made, and it was wrong, and I have spent every day since trying to become someone worthy of a second chance. Vivian did not know what to say. For a year she had maintained her walls, had kept their interactions polite and practical, had refused to let him see the parts of her that still remembered what it felt like to be loved by him. But walls got heavy, and she was so tired of carrying them. I cannot promise you anything, she said finally. I cannot pretend that what you did not happen. I cannot go back to being the person I was before you left. That person does not exist anymore. I know. But I can tell you that the person I am now sees what you are trying to do, sees that you have shown up consistently for our daughter, sees that you have been patient and humble and willing to do the work instead of just throwing money at the problem. She took a breath. And I can tell you that I am open to the possibility that people can change, that the man you are today might not be the same man who left 6 years ago, that maybe, eventually, there could be something between us again. Julian's eyes widened. Really? Maybe, I said maybe, and it would have to be slow, slower than slow. I will not risk Iris's stability for anything, not even this. I understand, whatever you need, whatever pace you set, I will follow your lead. Vivian studied his face, looking for any sign of the manipulation or impatience that had characterized his previous life. She found only hope, only willingness, only a man who had finally learned what actually mattered. Okay, she said, okay, we will see. It was not forgiveness, not reconciliation, not the dramatic reunion that movies promised. But it was a door cracked open. And for now, that was enough. The story does not end with a wedding, not another one. Some people might want that. A neat conclusion where everyone gets what they deserve and the credits roll over images of family happiness. But real life is messier. Real healing takes longer. Real trust, once broken, requires years of consistent action to rebuild. What I can tell you is this. Julian kept showing up, week after week, month after month. He was there for Iris's school plays and parent-teacher conferences. He was there for skinned knees and bad dreams and the ordinary emergencies of childhood. He was there in ways he had never been there for anyone, including himself. And slowly, gradually, almost imperceptibly, Vivian began to let him in. Not all at once, not without setbacks and difficult conversations and moments when old wounds reopened and needed tending. But forward, always forward. Iris turned 8 and asked if her parents could both come to her birthday party, not separately, together. It was the first time she had requested something like that. They said yes. The party was chaos in the best possible way, children running everywhere, cakes smeared on faces, presents torn open with joyful abandon, and in the middle of it all, 2 people who had hurt each other terribly, learning how to be in the same room without the weight of all that history crushing them. Make a wish, Vivian said as Iris leaned over her candles. Iris closed her eyes tight, her face scrunched with concentration. Then she blew. All 8 candles went out in a single breath. What did you wish for? Julian asked. She smiled that smile that was half his and half her mother's. "I cannot tell you, then it will not come true." But later that night, after the guests had gone and the presents had been catalogued and the sugar crash had finally surrendered to sleep, Iris whispered something to her mother. "I wished for us to stay like this." Vivian pulled her daughter close. "Like what, sweetheart?" "Together, all of us, whatever that looks like." Whatever that looks like. It was not a definition, it was a possibility. And sometimes that is the best kind of ending. Not a conclusion, but a continuation. Not a resolution, but a beginning. Not the story we expected, but the one we actually needed. Vivian Cole had built an empire from the wreckage of abandonment. She had raised a daughter who carried herself like royalty. She had proven that survival was possible, that success was achievable, that love was not a prerequisite for a meaningful life. But she had also learned something else. That walls could protect you and also imprison you. That strength could save you and also isolate you. That some stories do not have villains, just people making terrible choices and living with the consequences. Julian Asher had learned too. That the things you chase often cost you the things you need. That success without presence is just decorated loneliness. That the people we abandon sometimes become the ones we spend our whole lives trying to get back. And Iris learned that families come in different shapes. That broken things can be mended. That the choice to let someone in is always harder and braver than the choice to keep them out. She would grow up with both her parents in her life, not in the same house, not in the traditional arrangement, but present, committed, learning together how to be the family they should have been from the beginning. It would not be perfect. Nothing ever is. But it would be real. And sometimes, real is better than perfect. Sometimes, real is everything. If this story moved you, it is because some part of it is true for all of us. We have all lost something. We have all had to rebuild. We have all stood at the crossroads between holding on and letting go and wondered which choice would save us and which would destroy us. The answer is usually both. The answer is usually that we do not get to choose just once. We have to keep choosing, every day, who we want to be and what we want our lives to mean. Vivian chose to let go of her anger. Julian chose to earn back what he had thrown away. Iris chose to believe that people could change. And together, they built something none of them could have built alone. That is not a fairy tale. That is just life. Messy and complicated and harder than it should be. But worth it. Always worth it. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it touched something in you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling me what you would have done in Vivian's position. And subscribe to Untold Desires by Mr. Lewis for more stories that make you feel something real. Because the best stories are not the ones that make us escape from life. They are the ones that make us understand it better. Until next time, stay brave, stay open, stay human. The end.